Hi everyone, it's the top of the hour and we're going to get rolling here in just a second. We got a big full agenda today, so we want to get started as soon as we can, but due to the update to Adobe over the weekend, we are definitely going to allow for a little bit of time to get folks situated. So welcome, HMIS System Admin monthly webinar today. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Welcome to the call. And we are seeing those participant numbers tick up and up, so we're excited to get started here. Thanks. Yes, I'm back. I'm happy to be with you all. This is truly one of the best parts of my job. Okay. I'm seeing the numbers of participants kind of go to more of a crawl instead of a run, I guess, opposite of crawl. Okay, we are, the call-in information is not posted up on our updates, but we will get that for you soon. If you're having any audio difficulties, please submit a question and we will get those resolved for you. And I think we are ready to get started. So, again, and welcome, and thanks for being here today. This is the HMIS System Admin monthly webinar, and we're going to cover a bunch of information today. You should be on this call if you're an HMIS lead or a system admin. You also may be in the call because you've been invested in the HUD SNAP data strategy in your community and part of the team of folks working on data improvements and using data locally. You might also be an ESGCV recipient or helping in the uploading process due to the CARES Act funding, and so we often have that as a topic on these calls as well. There may be any number of other reasons you're here, but we are sure glad you are, and welcome to the call. Remember that today, as usual, you are all on mute. The presenters will not be on mute. We'll pass the wand around us. We're recording this slide deck and presentation for you. We'll post that, the PDF of the slides, all the Q&As that came in during the course of the session today. All of that gets posted on our System Admin Hub, so you can access that, and we usually can do that within about a week of this call, so thanks for your patience there. Today, both while you're asking questions on the Q&A, please reference slide numbers so that if we don't get to your your question right away, we can understand what the context was that you were asking. Same applies if you get asked to submit an HMIS AAQ, because we can't get into the details of the answer with you on this call or in this format, or you just didn't have your question answered, or for whatever reason. You submit an AAQ about the content that you hear today. We would encourage you to reference that content by slide number if you can. It really helps us give you the best answer possible. So we have a big crowd today on the phone with us from SNAP. This Fran, of course. Fran Ledger and Karen de Blasio is on the call. Abby Miller is on the call. Norm Suchar is also on the call, and we're happy to have all our head friends with us today. As well on your TA team is Meredith Alspaugh from the Partnership Center, Jesse Jorstad from Apt Associates, Brian Rocco Priori from Cloudburst. I'm here too, Mary Schwartz, and Melissa is helping us with technology in the background. Thank you all so much for being with us, and I'm going to pass it over to, oh no, I'm not. I'm going to quickly just say we're going to talk about HUD updates. We're going to go over some reporting deadlines. We're going to talk a little bit about vaccine info, and then Meredith's going to spend the bulk of today walking through the data standard changes that we think you can anticipate in October coming your way. So we're going to go through those. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit at the end about foundations of HMIS, where to access some additional help, some intricacies of some of the guidance that with, questions that are coming in through the AAQs, et cetera. So we'll play that by ear depending on how long the data standards go. And let's get started with Fran.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you all for joining us today. We have an exciting day. We have some special guests with us, as you heard, and one of them is Abby Miller. We're celebrating Abby today, and Abby is a fan of otters, and we're a fan of Abby, so we have a lot of otters today. You'll see them throughout our presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Karen. Karen?
Hello, everybody. As Fran said, I'm Karen de Blasio. I'm the division director in the SNAPS office, and Fran asked me a couple weeks ago if I could join today's call to say a couple of words to Abby and about Abby to this group. I do want to apologize that I am not on camera. I tried to get on camera. I'm actually wearing green, but I actually did my hair and everything this morning, but my camera's not working. So at least you guys can hear me. That's the most important thing. So the one slide that I have up here, no otters, I'm sorry, but, clearly I'm technically challenged if I can't even get my camera to work. But I think this really is a great sentiment, especially with Abby as we are kind of honoring Abby today and paying tribute to all of Abby's work. And the slide reads, a truly great team member is hard to find, difficult to part with, and impossible to forget. So I sat down to write a couple of words to say and, thought about what I would say. And I actually did not sit down to write this until very late last night. And it's, not because I'm a procrastinator. I am a procrastinator, but it wasn't because I was procrastinating. It's really because I've been kind of mentally blocking from my head that Abby's actually will be leaving HUD. So now I've been made to accept that fact because I have to publicly announce this and tell you folks that she is leaving. We've been lucky enough to have Abby here in the SNAPS office for most of her 9 years or almost 9 years at HUD. I've been personally lucky enough to work alongside Abby for most of the time that she's been in SNAPS. I know that I'm kind of preaching to the choir here with this group, telling you guys about all of the amazing work that Abby has done and the impact that she has made, both within HUD, across our federal partners, and for all of you all as system leads and HMIS leads and as service providers. She has been a critical part of the data standards updates for the last several years. She has worked tirelessly to help you all build capacity in your communities around HMIS, around data. She has advocated and worked tirelessly again around ending veterans homelessness, worked with our unsheltered homeless population. She has pioneered coordinated entry policy, system performance measures. She's done obviously amazing work on groundbreaking work on our equal access rule that was passed several years ago. Stella, I could go on and on and on and name the things that Abby has done. And really, when you think about it, this is a ton of stuff that she's done in not a really long time here at HUD and in SNAPS. And not only does this work that Abby's done, does it directly impact how SNAPS does business, but I know that it's impacted, again, as I said, each of you, your staff, and ultimately it's had a positive impact on the clients that we're all working to serve. Abby's work has reached outside of HUD. She's worked with our federal partners, again, around data standards, around data, around ending homelessness, setting metrics. And I know that they're all impacted positively by the work that she's done. And ultimately, again, the folks that they serve are impacted positively. So before I wrap up and invite Norm Suchar, our office director, to say a couple of words to Abby, I want to say this to Abby. Abby, thank you. You are brilliant. You're driven. You're dedicated. And you're humble. It's been my distinct privilege and honor to work with you. I've always loved the saying that you should always leave something better than the way you found it. Well, Abby, you're definitely leaving HUD, SNAPS, and the homeless field much better, and HMIS much better than the way we were when you found us. And we will just be forever grateful. And I know this is not goodbye. I know that I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being you, for all that you've done. And I have no doubt that we'll continue to see your impact in our world, even if it's not here at HUD. So with that, I want to hand it over to Norm because I know that he wants to say a few things.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I just want to, first of all, echo exactly what Karen said. I think you said it incredibly well. Abby's list of accomplishments is really kind of astounding for the time she's been with us at the office. I do want to just highlight a couple things. One is, Abby's sort of level of diving in and thoughtfulness and really unpacking very challenging concepts and issues and challenges is just really unmatched in the office. It's amazing to watch her work and to take something that's incredibly complicated and just make it work. I especially want to sort of highlight the COVID work, and I think, we have stood up a technical assistance operation with the help of many of the people on this call and many, many other technical assistance providers. And Abby really served as the linchpin for getting that all off the ground and going. And I think it's been just a tremendous success. And then, Abby, your work on system performance measures has just been incredible. I think everyone knows that system performance is vital to the work of the office, and everything from sort of identifying exactly how we were going to measure system performance, how that was all going to work, the technical assistance, the rollout, and then Stella, which I continue to think is just an amazing tool to visualize and understand what's going on with performance. Abby, your fingerprints are all over all of those things. And I just, couldn't be both more proud to have worked with you, but also just so pleased and optimistic about the future of homelessness work thanks to your work. I also want to say that for those of you who haven't had the chance to work closely with Abby is hilarious and just a joy and so much fun to work with. And it's just been an incredible pleasure. So, Abby, thank you so much. As Karen said, I'm sure we will be working together going forward, even if in a different capacity. But thank you, and on behalf of the whole office, we thank you. And Abby, I now get to turn things over to you.
Oh, my partner just gave me a handkerchief. So I am crying actively, so we'll see how this goes. But the honors, oh my God. I had no idea that this was happening, but the thing that I wanted to say to all of the system administrators, you are a gift to the field. There is, I think, our common data nerddom is so critical to the field. I was thinking of how to put this before I came on, and I think I went actually back to my undergrad work was in rhetoric, how people talk about things, how they argue about things, and like what is a fallacy and what is a solid argument. And I carried that work, that knowledge into homelessness, and was struck by how many times people use fallacies as arguments. They hold up a single anecdote or a single story, or they just make up a narrative that fits whatever a worldview is. And the thing that we get to do in our role is bring evidence and clarity and insight into conversations where sometimes the whole argument is, I think this, no, I think that. And where can you go from there? And so I see us raising the field every time we make it through an LSA round, every time the data standards get updated. But it's the other stuff. And that is why I say you are a gift to the field, because this role is so hard. Because you have to keep the trains running,
You have to keep the contracts with the vendors. You have to do all of this stuff that's just like the bare minimum to keep it running. But then we're also asking for all of this other stuff, like be a change agent, bring the data to the meetings, like make us talk about it, put it in front of us so we can't ignore it. And that is, while a somewhat impossible task, it is like the thing that hopefully we just continue to do imperfectly the whole time that we're doing this work. Because that's what it is. Like, we'll never be perfect at this, but we have to see ourselves as change agents and data as a really strong tool in that change. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to say, is just how much I appreciate being part of this community, the broader homeless service community, but in particular, those of us who sit with data and love it, and also love our field and know what we can do to bring it into the field. I think it's just so powerful, and it is a community that I care deeply about. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Leaving SNAPS is very weird, because I in my heart of hearts know that I need to go take some time and figure out what I want to do next. And also, I love the SNAPS office, and I love working with you all. So that is hard, and that is something I'm just sitting with. But it is not for lack of passion about this work. And we'll see where I pop up after this. But I really like knowing that Fran and Stella are with you going forward. I've loved so much introducing Stella to everybody. It's an incredible tool, and I think that's it. I'm now very much at danger of rambling. So I am going to stop and turn it back over to Fran.
I think Karen and Norm captured all of the great things that I wanted to say about Abby and the great work that she's done with HUD. One of the things that wasn't mentioned, that is an experience that I've had, and I know that other SNAPS folks have had, and also TA providers, is she's been also a great mentor. And so I just wanted to add that piece in. I also wanted to tell folks, system administrators and vendors and other folks that are on the call, if you want to, you can drop a comment into the Q&A. If you want to say something to Abby and leave a remark, you can put something in the Q&A and we'll post it up so Abby can take a look and see. We'll make sure that she has that available to her. And you'll see otters throughout the call. But I really appreciate all the things that Abby has brought in her work here at HUD, and will deeply miss her presence. Doing the work here, she's had a huge impact, but as others have said, we know that she will continue to support the work that we're doing. And we'll probably have Abby and Karen on for a little bit longer, but then they'll drop off the call. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Abby. I'm going to start jumping into the rest of this webinar so we can hear about the data standards. So let's I'm going to speed through kind of this HMIS reporting update. You'll have access to the slides, so you'll be able to take a look at them in more detail, but I just want to thank everybody for the system performance measures, getting those submitted. We had almost everybody submit them. We have some outliers, but some challenges some folks have, but we're working through those. RAI reporting is happening, so you want to, a message went out for a webinar that's coming up, but there's some dates there for the reporting, so you can take a look at that. The point in time count and housing inventory count submission, The submission opening hasn't happened yet, but an announcement will come out, and the deadline is anticipated to be April 30th. The ESGCV quarterly reporting is going to happen in April. And we want to also let folks know that Stella P is available for Stellavizing. There was a listserv that went out. If you didn't get that, you can go to the HUD Exchange to learn more about it. But we are doing batch Stellavizing now for everyone, so that's new, and it will take some of the burden off of folks. It'll make it a little bit easier. And we want to know that HUD, sounds like
can you hear me? No one can hear you.
No. I can hear you now.
Somehow I think maybe only those of us on the phone can hear each other. So we're going to give the phone number out, I think, in the chat.
I'm going to go ahead and start on the reporting recap really quick. So a few of you heard me run through that. I'm not going to reread that whole thing. Folks can look at that slide, but the most important thing coming up is there's a lot of reporting in April. And you can see those dates there. I apologize for the sound issues. But you can check this slide out and look for this information and know that HDX 2.0 may be offline April 3rd and 4th over a weekend. And we also are going to move the hub listserv where you get announcements for this meeting over at HUD Exchange. And we'll send out more information soon on that so nobody misses it. Brian, do you want to go ahead and talk about vaccine information? Brian's not on audio, so I'm going to talk about the vaccine information. So we have some updates on vaccine information that we wanted to provide to communities. There are a link of resources down below. This is information that's specific around data collection. We want to, we just want to make sure people understand that, the HMIS is playing a key role in making sure people understand what's happening around vaccination and assisting people understanding where there's additional need for people getting connected to being able to have access to vaccines. So there's a lot of really critical documents out there that you can take a look at and see how HMIS and your community can play a role in that. So take a look at those documents. We have technical updates. We're going to turn it over to Meredith.
Sure thing. And I just want to say real fast, we are recording, and I believe that the recording will have everything we were saying because we didn't lose our audio connection on the telephone number. So those of you that missed what Fran was saying, it will be available in the recording. We will post the recording. We will post the slides. So you will get all of that information and those updates as well.
That's right.
So I am going to hop into technical updates here. Hopefully our other folks will be able to get back on the phone. Thank you so much for your patience as we work through this. Okay, so just to sort of frame how we're going to talk through data standards updates today, I know we did a kind of a high-level review last month or maybe the month before. We're going to dig in a little deeper today. We're going to look at the specific changes that have been or potentially will be getting made to the existing data elements. We will talk through a handful of new data elements, and then we're going to talk through some programming logic, some data collection guidance updates or clarifications, things that aren't necessarily specific to, changes within the elements themselves, but still related to the data standards. I do want to say also, just as a reminder, everything we review today is still tentative. We're not expecting many changes, but certainly things are subject to change until all of these changes are signed off on by the federal partners and HUD. they will be finalized by the end of the month, by the beginning of April. So let's just jump right in. Starting with project descriptor data elements, there is a new field in the project information 2.02 data element. It is a HOPWA funded medical facility field. So HOPWA needed some additional information about their particular project. So this is now in the project information PDDE. If it is a HOPWA funded project, no or yes would be answered. If it is not a HOPWA funded project, that would be indicated here and no further action is needed. So relatively straightforward there. There's also a new funding source option in data element 2.06 funding sources. It is a HUD COC joint component RRH PSH project. It's not going to be applicable to anything at this point. There will be guidance about it moving forward. In the meantime, it is just a new option that is in the data standards. It is not expected to be an option that is actually selected or used at this point. Getting into universal data elements, there is a little more, there's not new universal data elements, but there have been some updates to some of the language and some of the response options and some of the descriptors in the manual as well. So the first one to look at here is race. There were some revisions made to the descriptions in the labeling. The intent here was to provide more inclusionary and representative language for all demographics. Now, there is a limitation on how much could be changed in these universal data elements for a number of reasons right now, many of them related to just different federal partners' rules around when they can change data collection, how they can change data collection, et cetera. So this was really HUD and the federal partners' first step towards making some improvements in the language, recognizing that there's still improvements to be made and still changes that would ideally get made in the future. Just a little more on this. This was not a decision that was made by these 5 people on the phone right now. This was a decision that was made accessing the race equity demo team. We had a group of subject matter experts that were focused exclusively on this sort of racial equity and this race perspective. We did seek out a number of different folks' opinions. The federal partners had some, experts that weighed in on this topic also. And so again, this is where we landed with the revisions to the race data element at this point, knowing that there is still room to make improvements and still areas for growth in this particular element. So you'll see highlighted here on the screen some of the updates that are being made to these field labels, the addition of Indigenous for American Indian and the Alaska Native option, for Asian, the addition of Asian American, and then for Black, African American, or African, just clarifying that a little further too. And again, you will see some additional updates in the manual and the data collection guidance that address this topic as well. Similarly, HUD and their federal partners sought advice from the race equity team and other experts in the field related to making more inclusive language for the Hispanic data, or for the ethnicity data element, specifically around, whether the it previously was Latino. There was conversations about Latina, Latinx, Latino, like what should be the right language there. And so this ultimately was decided to have multiple options presented. So Latina, Latino, Latinx, all available on screen so that we can hopefully improve representation in the language that is being used for ethnicity. The third UDE that is being updated here is the gender data element, and this one actually is probably the most significant change at this point. Again, recognizing HUD and their federal partners, recognizing this is not necessarily ideal at this point, but it is a stepping stone. It is a move towards being more inclusive and more representative in the data that is being collected about people experiencing homelessness. So what you're seeing on your screen here would be the new response options for gender. So you would have woman, man, note that they are no longer male and female, which are sex and not gender. So we've updated those to woman, man, and then we have a gender other than a singularly a woman or a man, for example, non-binary, gender fluid, agender, or a culturally specific gender. We have transgender, we have questioning, and then we have the typical don't know, refuse, missing, or data not collected. The important thing that is really, noticeable here, aside from the words are actually different, is that participants will be able to select as many options as apply. So one who identifies as a man and as a transgender man can select man and transgender. If they only want to identify as transgender, they can select only transgender. There is a combination of different options that they have the ability to select from. Now, we would not allow them to select man and client refused, so there's going to be some logical restrictions there, but otherwise they can select any number of those gender identities that they would like to. This again, there were several different conversations with a host of different experts in the field. Jesse from our team here specifically led that effort and did a fantastic job of bringing together a variety of experts to really weigh in and have some very thoughtful and meaningful conversations about this. And so, again, this is a first step moving forward. This is one in particular that HUD is still really working through with their federal partners. This would be one that everyone hopes that we see actually come to fruition, but this is one when I say, these aren't final yet, they're not fully approved yet, this is one that is still really being discussed with HUD and the federal partners. Moving along, in the same sort of vein of improving our language in the data standards, there's some outdated language in some of the common program-specific data elements. So specifically, there was mental health problem. That language has been updated to mental health disorder. So you'll see throughout the elements that we've changed mental health problem to mental health disorder. Similarly, in the what was formerly the substance abuse data element, we have updated that language to substance use disorder. And again, throughout the element, changed substance abuse to substance use. You'll also see, and I think I actually have this on another slide, but we've made a couple other updates in some of the field labels where those more antiquated terms were used and have changed them from abuse to use. There was also a request from a couple different folks to add another event option to the coordinated entry event list and the referral lists. So there is now a new kind of a catch-all emergency assistance / flex fund / furniture assistance new option in there for those that are making referrals to that type of emergency assistance. There is, okay, we're getting into some new data elements here. This is a new federal partner program-specific data element. This is a HOPWA element. So HOPWA requested that this new element be added to their projects to collect information about whether, recipient or participants were prescribed antiretroviral medications. So this is pretty straightforward, whether or not they've been prescribed the medicine. So this will be applicable to HOPWA-funded projects only. There's also, within W3 in the HOPWA program, there is a medical assistance data element, and there are some new fields there to document whether a participant is receiving Ryan White-funded medical or dental assistance. So you'll see those new fields in there as well. Again, applicable only to HOPWA projects. One of the bigger changes this year is for the COC program. It is a new well-being data element. HUD is really interested in learning more about a client's personal well-being and the perception of their well-being during their homelessness experience or during their participation in the particular HUD-funded, COC-funded program project. So there are a handful of fields here within the well-being data element: client perception that their life has value and worth. There is another, their perception on the support that they have from others who will listen to their problems, their perception that they have a tendency to bounce back after hard times, the frequency of feeling nervous, tense, worried, frustrated, or afraid. And you'll notice that these, this data element is a little different than other data elements that we have in the data standards. We are measuring things a little differently. There's not necessarily a yes-no question here, right? We're looking at this scale of responses. So this is a slightly different format, but this is something that HUD is looking to add to their housing projects, their transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing. It's actually not applicable to the street outreach and services only projects. This was an update that was very recently made since these slides were put together. So ignore that. We'll fix that in the version that we release to the Sys Admin Hub. But I did want to say, too, the other part that HUD is looking at for well-being is the general health status. We are working with RIE to determine if perhaps we just make the R7 data element applicable to the COC program instead of adding another field. But that is still under consideration. So there either will be the applicability of R7 to those COC programs, or we will adjust this new well-being data element to include it in there. So still figuring that detail out. Also, with the COC-funded program, the PSH project specifically, HUD is interested in measuring participation in moving on initiatives. So there is a new element sort of treated similar to like a service at the point that they may receive moving on assistance. It would be indicated which type of moving on assistance they received. So whether that's just subsidized housing applications, financial assistance, non-financial assistance, or just maybe a housing referral or placement. So again, this is going to be applicable only to the permanent supportive housing projects, but it will be applicable to all COC-funded projects, COC PSH projects. I think last new COC program data element is specific to YHDP projects. This is the youth education status data element. And those of you that have YHDP funded projects or a YHDP community, you know that for the most part, all of the YHDP funded projects collect the RIE data elements for education status. HUD determined there was some slightly different information that they wanted on the YHDP program than what was being collected in the RIE program. So this YHDP specific data element here is very similar to the RIE element, but it is not the same. It is really interested in learning about current enrollment and attendance in school, what is the most recent educational status is, and what their current status is. So if they obtain their GED, or if they're currently in high school or working towards their GED. Again, it's very similar to those RIE fields, but it is different. So there will be more information coming, as with all of these, like all of the federal partner manuals get updated, the HMIS manual gets updated, you will get additional data collection guidance. But yeah, too far. Moving on to the VA as a federal partner, their V3 financial assistance data element has received a slight update there. There were previously two sort of general housing stability responses. Those have been collapsed into one. So there is a single response there, and there is a new food assistance response under V3. V7, SSVFHP targeting criteria this has been pretty significantly restructured. And one of the things that is changing about it too would be that the name is changing. It will be known just as the HP targeting criteria. There is some potential for some other federal partners to pilot with this particular element and do, implement it with other funding sources. And so it didn't seem to quite make sense to just call it an SSVF element anymore. So the name is changing for one. The other significant change is that it is now, there is a new field in there, number one, whether or not this targeting screener is even required. So if it is not required, then it just can get skipped over. If it is required, then the following fields that were previously all there, and previously I think folks were responding no to, that really wasn't quite accurate. Now it can just be skipped over if it's not appropriate to complete the screener with their clients. So that overall structure has changed. Also, many of the actual field responses have changed. They've either been collapsed together. There are a couple new ones. They're teased out a little bit. It will be one that you probably just need to read more carefully than you can right now on this call as we're trying to work through it. But you'll see that there are some slight subtle differences within these response options. There are a lot of them. I think there's 20-something of them. So it is a very comprehensive screener, but they're on screen for you, but I'm not going to read in the interest of time. Those two have stayed the same, the HP applicant total points and the grantee targeting threshold score. Otherwise, several changes in the element. So those are all of the new elements. Those are all of the changes to the fields, responses, labels, that sort of stuff. That's all the information, that the vendors are changing on the screen, so to speak, for you. But there's still a number of other changes that are being implemented also, or additional points of clarity that have been brought to our attention from vendors, from you all over the last couple of years. So I'm going to talk through a couple of those. One being auto exit functionality. We have heard from folks that there was some confusion about how auto exits should be implemented. Just a reminder, auto exit functionality is not a requirement, and HUD is not making it a requirement of HMIS software. But they know that lots of vendors do provide that. So we wanted to add some consistency and clarity for those that are using an auto exit feature that coincides with the instruction in the manual. So the manual states, that COCs have to be part of the determination, that the auto exit would be completed, after the last activity, whether that's a bed night or a service, depending on the project type. So all of that information is in the manual, and we just wanted to make sure that the vendors were really clear on what those expectations were as well. We also clarified the guidance around relationship to head of household in 3.15 and household ID 5.09. As you recall, I think Jesse said a couple meetings ago that the number one flag related to the LSA was around heads of household. So we really took a lot of effort to try to, anywhere we could in the data standards guidance, make it explicitly clear that there is a single head of household. And how to handle household changes, management, and logic, keeping in mind there is only one. So we did a lot of consistency checking and improvements there. We also get a lot of questions about how to handle children who age into adulthood while participating in a project. And so there are a number of places where in the income and sources and the non-cash benefits specifically, we have added some additional guidance for how to handle those situations. How to handle recording an update for a person who turns 18, right? Like, what do you do with their project start then? What data collection stage is it when you turn 18? So we added that additional information in there to treat the income at 18 as an update and make the income or non-cash benefit at project start as 0 or none. So that has been added throughout, again, the dictionary and the manual to make those clarifications. Also, housing move-in date, right? There had been a number of questions about how to handle housing move-in date, what the logic was for some of that. one of the clarifications we made was around the fact that the housing move-in date can only be on or between the project start and the end date for that particular enrollment. Just as an example, one of the things that was clarified there. There also were some inconsistencies in the data collected for the Hopla field specifically. So we just tweaked those a little bit to represent household members with HIV/AIDS instead of where it said only clients funded in Hopla presenting. It was just some weird language things. So we cleaned up some of that. We also cleaned up some language around the pregnancy status. This was one we heard a lot of feedback from a lot of different folks about. Previously the data collected about was female head of household. And, rightly so, lots of folks pointed out that people with different gender identities could be pregnant. And so ultimately, we tried to make this we tried a lot of different things, quite frankly. And with the changes being made to the gender field, and, the different options that one can select, we are trying not to be exclusionary, right? And we want those who can be pregnant to be able to indicate so for the RIE funded projects, for the YHTV funded projects, or for anyone else that's collecting the pregnancy status. So we changed that to be more inclusive. So that's one of the changes that you'll see as well. And then finally, when Mary starts talking about her next steps here, I think we're going to have time for her to get through. She's going to talk about a couple more improvements, I suppose, clarifications that we're making in the data collection guidance. Mary triages, and Brian, your questions, all the AAQs. So she knows a lot about what the common issues are and where we need improvement. And so she's going to work those pieces in where she can also. So she'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But just so you all know where we are with next steps, we are going to, like I said, get the sign off from HUD and their federal partners to all of the changes that we talked about today. Make sure that we've captured everything correctly, make sure we've got all the changes correct. And then it is our hope to release the materials per the timeline. And I think we looked at this timeline before. The materials will go to the vendors first at the end of the end of March, 1st of April. They will have a month with them. They do get those in advance. They take a look at them. They help review for quality control issues. They help identify any potential areas of concern. If we need to make any revisions or corrections before we release them more broadly, we do that. And then we release them to HMIS leads and COCs on May 3rd is our target goal here. We will also be updating programming specifications in the coming months and getting those out. So APR, Keeper, whatever other reports, CSV, those different things that need to be updated in the coming months. We will get those out and released as well. The federal partners will be working on their data collection guidance this summer, and they will be releasing updated manuals, hopefully by August, as soon as they can, so that we can make sure that you all are very clear on that when you're doing your training with your users. Okay, with that, I think that is everything data standards related. I'm going to pause. I'm sure there are questions. We can take those now before Mary takes on her section.
A co-moderator has joined the conference. A co-moderator has joined the conference.
I can't hear you. You're not muted, are you? Brian, can you talk? Jesse?
I cannot.
Oh, no, I hear you.
What? All right.
Oh, gosh. Jesse, I don't know. Did you look at the questions? Is there anything that you think I should answer before we move on?
there were a lot of questions, although I think we have gotten through them, a good number of them anyway. Oh, just kidding, I was on the wrong screen. New interface, good stuff. No, I don't think there's anything that we need to cover that was sort of like a global question coming from a lot of folks. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the next section. It doesn't look like we have Mary yet, though.
Okay.
All right. Well, because teamwork makes the dream work, I'm going to present Mary's stuff. And Mary's going to make meaningful eye contact with me if I get it wrong. Maybe we can establish some sort of system of hand signals quickly. And we'll just see what happens next. Okay. So hopefully I was listening earlier when Mary was talking about her slides. Here we go. Okay. So we wanted to remind folks that there is foundational information about how to manage your HMIS available. There will be a restructuring of the HMIS HUD Exchange soon that will include adding the HMIS lead listserv to the HUD Exchange. We anticipate making the HMIS lead trainings available through the learning management system. And there are also HMIS foundational webinars and documents that will provide you with the basics that are part of that curriculum. Many of the NHSDC sessions will rely on these presentations as the foundation for the conversations that are happening during those sessions. So NHSDC is scheduled between April 12th and the 30th. And these calls, unlike those materials which are, more foundational, these calls are to talk about the things that are more intricate, the detailed nuances, to talk through specific scenarios, and indications from reporting events or AAQs that tell us that things maybe aren't being implemented the way that we intended them to be implemented, or that there is some confusion once the data standards actually hit the real world, right? And then to provide interactive Q&A about existing guidance. Okay, so if you're looking for these webinars on the HUD Exchange, you can navigate there via this link and click on trainings in the upper section and then past trainings. On the left, select load 10 more, and then select HMIS in the filter, select HAS related materials, and select webinars. I'm so glad that Mary is so specific in her instructions with slides, just in case something like this happens. So we're not missing any content because it is all on the slide. So, okay. So we wanted to talk about, and just acknowledge that there is always going to be some difference between the guidance that is issued, the reporting requirements, and then this Venn diagram could even have a third circle, which would be real life, right? And we're always working to have that overlap be as comprehensive as possible, but there's a lot of moving pieces. So we wanted to talk about that as it relates to tracking your inventory in HMIS, which was certainly a pain point that came up during the LSA data review processes. So, one of the ways that, or some of the ways that we get there, it's around like the frequency of the guidance that we give, guidance around what constitutes significant changes. We want to create more transparency around the hierarchy of errors that are specific to the LSA, because I'm sure a lot of you had an experience where maybe you had a flag that was like, there's this discrepancy for your emergency shelter. There's a discrepancy for your adult-only emergency shelter. There's a discrepancy for this specific project that is adult-only emergency shelter, right? And a lot of times when you cleared up this little flag, it also cleared up the issues that were above it, right? We want to make those relationships more apparent. Providing clearer expectations about, what we mean by tracking your inventory and what those, when things should be updated. Provide better tools for understanding your data quality. Provide guidance around when there are logical outliers. So the data quality flags that are developed by the AHAR team are to try to let you know when there is an outlier, but those flags can't differentiate between when something was unexpected but actually did happen and is valid data versus something where that actually is a data error. So an example would be if you have an adult-only shelter and you have an enrollment that is a child-only. That is unexpected. That certainly could happen because you could have like an emancipated minor. Or it could be the case that that child was accidentally enrolled by themselves and they should have been enrolled with a family, or they're in the wrong program, or there's a bunch of different things that could have happened there, right? And then, you know, one of the other challenges to reconciling all of this is that the size and the scope of the COC needs to be taken into consideration. One of the reasons that we can't just set thresholds is because, you know, if we say, okay, the threshold is 3%, but your community has a project where there's only 10 beds and one of those is wrong, you know, that's already 10%. So it's just, there's a lot of nuances here, and we need to be careful about how we move forward. So those are just some of the things that we've been thinking about as we're digesting how the data collection cycle went, the feedback that we've gotten from you all, and the feedback from the vendors.
A co-moderator has joined the conference.
Oh, Mary might be back with us. Let's see.
Hi.
Waiting with bated breath. Oh, it's Mary.
Oh my God.
You are just in time to talk about this exciting slide. Welcome back. We're glad to have you. Glad you're here.
Great. Although
I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm a participant now, though, not a presenter. So you'll have to forward for me, but I can talk this through for sure. Jesse, you did a fantastic job. I guess.
Thank you.
You know, back to the like overlapping circles. That's the ultimate goal here, right? That those circles align, and that means that we come together both like following the guidance that's there, being vocal like you guys have about where guidance needs to be improved, and we work on that, and you know, using the guidance that we've published to create the flags and whatever that might occur in any reporting. Although I think what we all have in our minds right now, right, is LSA and lots of stuff there. So what I just want to, so I guess just to get myself on track with what I want to say here, you know, the foundations and knowledge of HMIS and being an HMIS lead, like there's a lot out there that's available to shore up your information. There's a lot of new folks on the call today. I know that from, you know, adding folks to the hub over the last month. There's, of course, a bunch of veterans out there on the phone with us today that have heard this a million times before. So like nothing ever really changes. So we just want to reiterate that we are listening and we hear you, and there is work to be done on all sides. I have a couple slides after this where like we see the opportunities are and where each like partner in this job of getting HMIS data right and projects set up correctly and the reporting and making sure, you know, data quality is high, like all of that comes together and everybody has a role in it. So as an example, and one of the things that, you know, you will never be able to go into detail in a foundation type, you know, data quality 101 or inventory 101, you know, those kinds of webinars or things you would access through the HUD Exchange or NHFCC, those would not be able to cover those really detailed scenarios and situations that occur. So that's what the AAQ desk is for. And if you don't get your answer there, you know, when you're submitting reports, you might get flags or warnings that, hey, this doesn't add up. So here's one example of that, just a very small example. So this example on the top and the bottom of the screen are the same. An emergency shelter project has adults-only beds. In the top example, one pregnant woman enrolled, and while enrolled, the child was born, and the mom and the baby come back to the shelter for a brief stay prior to moving on. So the data standards would tell you, you know, of course, enroll the child in the project at the point that they are being housed by the shelter. You know, mom and baby may be there for a while. It's an adult-only bed, but that's the reality of the situation. And so you record the data appropriately in HMIS. But then you go to submit a report that looks at your inventory and your client records, and now you get a warning. You have more than zero adults with children households, right? Because there's a mom and a baby in your enrollment records, but you don't have any inventory in HMIS reflective of adults and children beds or units. So what do you do in that situation? Well, in that case, you might just respond to that with like, hey, that's valid. This is the one-off situation that occurred in this adults-only shelter. We don't anticipate switching this bed to an adults with children bed. It's not for the long term. It just happened. It's not typical for the project. So we're not going to change anything about that data. And it is what it is. In that same scenario, though, on the bottom of the screen, the slight difference would be, we have an adults-only shelter and some number, 15%, 20%, this is the thing that isn't clearly written down anywhere. We need to, in terms of overlapping those circles, we hear you. We need to figure out ways to say really clearly, like, this is the line that gets, once this line is crossed, that's the point it becomes a significant change and needs to be fixed. But there is no definite number on that. It's just that the warning is telling you that you have more than 0 households with children in this situation, but no beds that say they're adults with children beds. So what do you do? And when you look at that warning and then look at the data, you see that it actually is becoming like a fairly typical situation in your adults-only shelter that has created this kind of long-term kind of, use of these adults-only beds that really aren't ever reverting back to adults-only after the one-off situation or whatever the case may be. So that might be a thing. That's an example of when the significance of the change or the frequency of the inventory issue or something has created the situation where you go, oh, yeah, probably it should be adjusted such that, the project is more representative of the typical situations occurring. So it's just kind of a one small example. Again, this is really hard to get into details in this kind of a forum. There are some commitments, right, that we can make to do more detailed work with you in terms of training or having like office hours and open times kind of like this to get into nuances such as this, and also ways to help when something is like, hey, yeah, that's a one-off situation or an outlier and we don't need to adjust our stuff locally because of it, or wow, this is becoming something that requires an adjustment on our part to better represent the situations in our community. So I know it's not silver bullet answers and it's hard to get there sometimes, but we're working on, as Jesse said, like the guidance and the reports we require based upon that guidance, right? Those circles need to overlap as much as possible for there to be not this feeling, this cognitive dissonance that I think a lot of us are feeling right now around this exact topic. So that's all I'm going to say on inventory right now. Jesse and we've been saying it on this call a couple of months now since the LSA process was in full swing and also ended. There are things to do on all sides. So what can HUD do now to help make those circles overlap? So things like continuing to improve upon reporting requirements, right, which is in process, and helping with clarify deadlines and expectations, making that all clear. So that kind of better communication and improving upon the reporting requirements. Examining the errors and flags and making reasonable modifications and modifications that kind of approach those quality checks with more reasonableness. So also exploring ways to leverage, there is a hierarchical representation of the flags, kind of internally, but we need to kind of be more transparent with that, make that relationship more apparent. So that is one of the tasks to tackle, and that would mean that you would get one overarching error that would point you to, or flag that would point you to an issue, and not the 47,000 flags that are a result of that error, that one flag. So kind of scaling the amount of flags because there's a hierarchy there to take into account. Guidance, right? We need to write down what the frequency of updates to HMIS inventory records are or are to be expected. Right now, the guidance says once a year. You are at a minimum supposed to reconcile your HIC, your inventory that you report to HUD on the night of the point in time count, with your HMIS. You know, that annual reconciliation maybe isn't enough, but what is enough, and that hasn't been named yet. So we need to work on that. Significance of changes, like I just talked on the last slide, like is it 15%, is it 30%? Are you looking at a quarterly assessment of your data and determining that there was enough change, significant enough by some percentage that that quarter is the updates you need to make for that quarter, or whatever the ideas there would be. The more we can, and we understand this, the more we can set those parameters up for you to follow, like you'll follow them. That's the cool group that Abby has led over the years and Fran continues to lead. Like we're all part of this group that's like, yeah, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And we know that. So saying it is going to be important. And then we're looking at some project type specific stuff. We understand right now, for example, you know, rapid rehousing projects in particular might not be as reflective of traditional residential inventory as, you know, a transitional housing program or an emergency shelter program. So thinking through those kinds of details and writing down the instructions will be helpful moving forward. You know, more foundational and detailed demonstrations and instructions. So more of us and you and all of us in conversations like these together, webinars available for you to review, you know, adding to our suite of kind of services available to you is a goal. And transparency, obviously, so it's clear how errors in the data end up influencing the usability and the rates. I think my teammates here agree, you know, the more we can say, hey, if you have this error or this flag or this warning, this is how it's going to impact the reports or the analysis we're trying to do on this data set down the road. So if you knew that, we think probably you'd respond, right, and say, wait, that's not my utilization rate. Oh, I see where in the data that impacted that utilization rate, so I'm going to go back and, you know, fix that and make it right. So more transparency there. So that's what HUD could do. What can HMIS leads do? So, you know, a lot of this you've heard before, and we certainly know that you have, like Abby said, the biggest jobs out of all of everyone. you know, just holding down the fort in terms of the minimal requirements of an HMIS lead can be a very exhausting day-to-day job. So we know that. We do think, though, that kind of coming more to helping those circles overlap by ways of looking at what your procedures are locally for tracking inventory and changes to that inventory in HMIS, or reconciling the active clients and those that accidentally don't have an end date on their records, you know, but should those kinds of daily or monthly or weekly or whatever data quality procedures that you have, examining those and shoring those up, knowing that the current guidance means that you really only have to look at your inventory annually to align it with what you submit for the housing inventory count on the night of the point in time. Maybe that needs to happen more frequently. HUD isn't saying it has to, but maybe that is something to examine as you're looking at your procedures. Or maybe there are existing reports, right? This isn't something I'm going to say is like a mandated report that HUD has programmed, because every system is different and how this is tracked is different locally, but maybe there's a way in your data quality management to understand more frequently than once a year point in time counts of active clients to active beds or active households to active units or some sort of assessment like you see happening with the data quality checking that's happening at the federal level so that you can get a handle on it sooner than the once a year. The foundational webinars, like Jesse talked about, there's a way to find a whole bunch of information on HUD Exchange that's been recorded over the years, participating in NHSBC, asking your questions, being vocal like you are, submitting the AAQs, give us details as much as you can, but also remember that some of the answers, right, in the AAQs might come back to you as, hey, you've got to figure this out locally, or you might have to estimate this, because if we don't have the guidance to tell you exactly what to do, well, it has to be 15% change, and that's when you know, address the issue. Like, if it's not written down, it can't be the instruction for you. And so a lot of these decisions are left to the COC to determine. And once you determine these and set up your policies and procedures to kind of follow them yourselves, you know, hopefully you would see the improvement in the data quality. And then, hopefully as well, you know, we come through the guidance with more specifics around frequency and significance and all the things that are a little fuzzy right now so that you can then align processes you've already developed that maybe don't match up exactly to future HUD requirements that have numbers to them now, but you can do a nimble adjustment versus, you know, kind of hanging back and waiting for HUD to say what it should or shouldn't be, and then having to kind of tweak the whole system to put that in place. Like, start approaching that data quality management in that way, and you'll probably be further ahead. And I did figure out a way to get a St. Patrick's Day image in there. So, and remember that expressing, you know, your utilization rates according to HMIS and in your, of course, LSA, but also inventory is in the APRs and inventory is in a lot of other stuff. So expressing all that accurately means that we help support continued federal funding. That pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is, we don't want to tell funders that our beds are not full, because you guys know your beds are full. We know your beds are full, and we need the data to prove that the beds are full, and the data analysis is where, again, that magic spot is in the middle of overlapping circles of data and quality and reality and all that good stuff. So, Jesse, did that bring up any questions for you as I was talking that didn't quite line up with your nice intro to me and the slides that I did?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. So, in our last couple, oh look, I have a camera too. This has just been a joy of a technical webinar like no other. And we will continue, you know, to work on the technology and try and make it as good as we can for you guys. But some of this is out of our hands. Adobe decided to do an update, and it is what it is. Thanks for your patience with us. I did say to folks at the very beginning that at the end of the presentation, I'd flip back to the HUD reporting slide, because that was really the point at which a lot of people lost audio. So I'm going to do that. And Fran, are you on audio, or do you want me to just walk through those HUD updates reporting information?
I can run through that again if folks are able to actually hear me. Okay, great.
Yeah, 5 minutes or less. Yep, you're on.
Yeah, real great. So I thank folks for submitting their system performance measures. We had almost everybody get those in. We had some outliers, and of course we had to work with some folks on those. For RAI reporting, there was a registration link that went out for a training. There you can see on there's some dates through April to get prepared to, and leads up to the final upload due on April 30th. For the point in time count and housing inventory count, the submission opening is coming soon, and the deadline is April 30th. We know that is a tight timeline. and we're trying to get that submission open quickly. If we can make adjustments, we will, but we may not be able to. So just letting you know, deadline right now is anticipated to be April 30th. ESGCV quarterly reporting, April 1st through the 30th. And Stella P, we wanted folks to know that there's the availability to do Stellavizing, and we're doing batch Stellavizing this time. So we're Stellavizing everything, and that's going to help everybody across the board. All of the stuff will get Stellavized at once. And HDX is going to be offline briefly April 3rd and 4th over the weekend. And that's anticipated. There will be a notification that will go out on the HUD Exchange. So you'll have that information. I want to make a note here on the lead listserv moving over to HUD Exchange. There's going to be a specific announcement list set up on HUD Exchange just for the HMIS lead call. It's not open to the entire public. It's just managed the same way that happens on Sakai. And so you'll just get your announcements like you normally do for this call through that process, and you'll join Adobe like you always have. So that part will not change, and we're figuring out the forum and files and all of that stuff. So we're getting that figured out. And also I wanted to make a comment about the data standard changes. We couldn't do everything this time. You know, there are PRA requirements that we have to go through to make large changes. So we're restricted on the type of changes that we can entertain in the data standards. And there are things that communities really need and the federal partners need for reporting. And so we made small adjustments this time. We are hoping this will be incremental, and we'll make more adjustments in the 2024. So we want people's feedback in this process, and so we appreciate when you give that to us. There will also be a lot of training materials that will come out to support people in implementing these data elements. So not just your typical manuals and data dictionary and programming specs, but we're also going to provide some training manuals around race, ethnicity, and gender identity, and how you go about helping your end users do a better job at collecting information around those. I'll turn that over.
Cool. Okay. Okay, I just saw a question come in, but it disappeared. But any questions that need to be verbalized before we wrap up for the day? I'm going to go back to those end slides. I don't have any in my inbox, so Brian, Meredith, or Jesse, if there's anything to talk about.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay. Hi, everyone. Meredith, did you want to address Drew's question? I just assigned it to you, so you should be able to see it. All right, great.
Yep. So Drew asks, in relation to slide 45, got him thinking about how the PH projects are uploaded into Sage, and the HMIS client data is compared to an inventory record that is set in Sage, but HMIS leads don't have this information. I wanted to clarify where that comes from. That comes from the application in eSnaps. So the recipient, the person who is filling out the APR, submitting the APR to HUD, should have that information. And that information hopefully has been provided to you as the HMIS lead. But I just wanted to clarify that that's not some other number. That's the number from the application.
And that is also why we have said things in AAQ answers like, hey, you know, when the question has come in that's like, this, you know, that's not what our inventory is. People have looked at their APR, or they've gotten error messages through some upload and said, wait, this inventory number isn't right, or that doesn't match. And some of those answers have been, hey, what does your grant agreement say on what the inventory should be? Because that's often a good place to start as to what you were funded to do. And, you know, and then you look at the data of what you actually did, and then there's that fine dance between what we are supposed to be doing, what we did do, and what's a mistake and what's not, and what's the real story and what isn't, and that's the lovely dance that we're doing here. right? But
Exactly.
like if I've often put myself, I put myself in your guys' shoes all the time, and I used to do this job too as HMIS lead, and it was like you would come at this kind of bed to body active to, count, like try and analyze that at least at the 4 points that the APR looks at least at the 4 times that, are identified in whatever reporting we have locally, at least at the HIC point where we're submitting this data. So getting that idea, HMIS being synonymous, I guess, with the HIC, the housing inventory, it's a hard leap to make, and it's not easy, but it is kind of a way to think about it. So, any other questions? That was a great question. Okay. Remember that in addition to a slide on how to go and find those great webinars, they're hard for me to find. HUD Exchange is kind of a hard thing to search on sometimes, but we have linked you to a lot of great stuff here on the resources page. Remember that although the System Admin Hub is going away soon, like Fran said, or Jesse said for Fran, remember which, the HUD Exchange is going to be the repository, I think, for a lot of the webinar information, like many of the other calls are. But in the meantime, and until that happens, we don't have a date on it. The Hub is the way to access past webinar materials, and it is where we will post this webinar in all its glory and the Q&A and notes from it. And our next call is April 21st. So third Wednesday of every month. For all those new folks out there, you do need to put your own calendar appointments on your calendars. We don't hold the time for you on your calendars, and sometimes they change. And we make announcements about all of that through the Hub and the listserv that we manage. But at this point, you can plan on seeing us again in a month. So, wrong notepad. Where's the joke? It has to be an otter joke, right, Meredith? So, hey, Meredith, where do otters keep all their prized possessions?
I don't know. Where?
In a riverbank.
Ah!
Otters. If Abby Miller isn't on, oh, good, she is. I wish I got a snapshot of Abby and her videos. If you haven't seen them, they are definitely on the HUD Exchange. You should go watch Abby, or anytime you're feeling sad that she's not around, go watch Abby on a video about system performance measures. And thanks, everybody, for the call today. Sorry for the difficulties with technology, and we'll try again in a month. See you soon. Bye.